Imagine this scene with me for a moment. There is a loud crowd, the air is heavy, and the auctioneer is shouting over the noise. A woman stands on the auction block, exposed and shamed, about to be sold to the highest bidder. In those days when debts piled up or when someone was cast aside with nowhere else to go, the tragic end was often slavery. That's where Gomer, Hosea's wife, finds herself. Her choices, her betrayal have finally caught up with her, and she is being treated like a property, bartered like an object. She's lost everything: her dignity, her hope, her place in the community. And then, in the middle of all the jeers, a hand goes up and a voice says, "I will buy her back." To the shock of everybody, it's her husband. The one that she has wounded, the one that she has betrayed, is the one who buys her back. You imagine that? You imagine being the one wounded and betrayed and being the first to stand up and say, "I want her." Well, that's Hosea's life. That's his greatest sermon. And it is our glimpse into the heart of God. A love that refuses to quit on us, even when we quit on ourselves, even when we quit on each other, and when others quit on us. God never quits seeking us out. At the heart of Israel's life with God is this covenant. This is a relationship between God and the people. And God's covenant is to bless and to protect and to multiply this people into a nation that blesses the world. And the people make a covenant, they make a vow to God to walk faithfully, to be just and kind and merciful in their dealings with the most vulnerable and even with the other nations. But by Hosea's time, the covenant is in crisis. Idolatry, corruption, and injustice have torn at the relationship, and the vows have been broken. And Hosea's marriage to the prostitute Gomer becomes a living symbol of that broken covenant and of God's relentless desire to restore it. Through Gomer, Homer has 3 children whose names carry the weight of this heartbreak. The first was named Jezreel. That name carried a sting. Jezreel was a valley drenched in blood, a place where kings used violence and betrayal to cling to power. To name a child Jezreel would be like naming it Pearl Harbor or January 6th. It carried a sting. Every time you said it, the wound reopened. Jezreel. Every time you said it, the shame was remembered. Jezreel. And then came the daughter named No Mercy, and the son Nobody. Each name another cut, each name another sting, each name another sign that the covenant was unraveling. And then comes this amazing turn, which we didn't read, but is there in the text to come. God reverses those names of judgment. The same children once called No Mercy and Nobody are given new names. And God says, "You are my dear children, you are my beloved." The very place where you were told you are no people, you will be named God's somebody. And that's the rhythm we see in the prophets. It's the rhythm we see in Hosea: judgment and mercy, grief and hope. And holy tears hold both at the same time. Hosea begins to shift the people's understanding of God from a God who's concerned with rules and laws to a God who is intimate, like a parent bending down to raise his or her child to the cheek, or a spouse aching for his or her beloved. This is covenantal love, bruised and betrayed, yet not abandoned. In chapter 11, God says so beautifully, when Israel was a child, I loved him. I taught them how to walk, holding them up in my arms, but the more I called, the more they walked away. Some of you know that pain of a child who's walked away. And then we hear the divine lament, how can I give you up? My heart recoils within me. My compassion grows warm and tender. And I will not come in wrath, for I am God and not a human one, the Holy One in your midst. This is not a God who is unmoved by the betrayal. It is a God who is undone by love. Richard Rohr says it this way, the prophets do not foretell the future as many of us were taught. They tell us what God feels. They stand in the place of divine pathos, weeping God's tears and aching with God's ache. Do you know that ache? Perhaps you're aching for our nation. We love this country, and yet we grieve for it. We grieve the divisions that continue to cut families and communities apart. We grieve the cruelty that makes headlines over and over and over again. We grieve the violence in our schools and in our streets. We grieve the anger that tries to drown out and often does the sorrow that we're all feeling. And like Israel in Hosea's day, our national life, well, it's got enough idolatry and corruption and injustice. And we long for a better future, a different one. But instead of mourning together, what we often do is we grieve separately. And suspicion of each other has replaced solidarity. And anger hardens us where tears could soften us. Hosea's word seems to come on time. God does not let grief calcify into blame. Instead, God's tears soften the ground for mercy. The Persian Sufi poet Rumi once told a story called Love Dogs. A man prayed again and again, crying out, Allah, Allah, until a skeptic asked, what's the use? Have you ever heard anything back? Discouraged, the man stopped praying until he dreamed of Kidder, the guide of souls, who said, why did you stop? Because I never heard anything, the man replied. And Kidder answered, that longing you express is the return message. The grief you cry out from is the connection. There are love dogs no one knows the name of. Give your life to be one of them. Longing itself, the ache itself, is the connection. Sometimes it's the only felt connection that we have. The cry for God is the connection with God. When Hosea lets us hear God's broken heart, we are reminded that our own tears, our own cry, our own longing for God, these are forms of union with God, especially if we can imagine a God whose heart breaks. So what do we learn from Hosea and Gomer? Let me offer two things. I think we are given a window into courage, the courage to confess and the courage to care. I think Gomer teaches us the courage to confess. As a prostitute, she is one who cannot hide her flaws, and maybe that's why she belongs in the story, because so many of our lives are spent trying to cover up our flaws, to project the perfect image, to make everyone believe we've got it all figured out and everything is fine. I think it takes courage to say, I need help. I've failed. I think that's the kind of courage we can learn from Gomer. Last night at Porch Fest, what moved me most wasn't the musicians who were singing and playing from their hearts, their passion. It wasn't the warm West Side welcome that many of you offered the folks that gathered. For me, the most beautiful moment was when 100+ people showed up as the music was playing and as the sun was setting. They were here to go to a meeting that was happening downstairs, a 12-step program, Alcoholics Anonymous. They were coming here because they're courageous enough to say, I need help. And that group is powerful enough to be a place where it's safe to ask for help. It's a place where people are offered help over and over again. I think sometimes they do church better than we do. How many of us pretend everything's fine? I think it takes courage to say, you know what, I need help. I need help. Hosea, I think, teaches us the courage to care. He loves when everybody else mocks. He shows compassion when others are saying she's getting what she deserves. His love looks foolish and wasteful and unreasonable, and it is. But that's God's love right there. Confession and care are acts of courage, and they are the doorways to understanding and experiencing that covenantal love of God. I think of a father I once knew who drove hours every weekend to visit his son in prison. The boy stole from him and lied to him, broke his trust again and again. Friends told the father to give up on him, to protect himself, and to stop wasting his time going to the prison. But every weekend, there he was, showing up, hands on the glass, saying, "You're still my son, and I'm not giving up on you." I think of a woman in recovery who sponsors other alcoholics. She stays up with late night calls. She sits through relapse after relapse after relapse. She listens when it would be easier to put the phone down or walk away. Everyone else says to her, "Why bother?" But she stays, because that's what love does. I think of Hosea. His unfaithful wife, Gomer, being sold on the auction block. The crowd getting revved up. She's finally getting what she deserves, and that little hand goes up, and that voice says, "I'll buy her back." The word we use for this is redeem. It literally means buy back, to reclaim what's lost. Hosea redeems Gomer because God told him to do that. Christ redeems us because love compels Christ to do that. Redemption may sound like some abstract theological concept, but it's actually pretty concrete. It's a father visiting his son in prison over and over and over again. It's a sponsor hanging in there when she feels like running. It's a husband raising his hand saying, "I'll take her back." That's the heart of God, whether we like it or not. That's the heart of Christ. When Jesus is asked, what is the greatest commandment? He does something I don't think we talk about enough. He refuses to separate love of God with love of neighbor. You see, in his understanding, it's the same love. You can't pull it apart. They stay together. Hosea's love for Gomer, God's love for Israel, Christ's love for the body, the church, they're not three different kinds of love. It's one. One relentless, scandalous, covenantal love. Hosea's broken heart mirrors our own broken heart. Gomer's flaws mirror ours. And yet the holy tears in this story are not wasted. They water the soil of covenantal love. Richard Rohr says that holy tears hold together both grief and hope. They do not erase sorrow, but they prevent it from calcifying into cynicism. Tears keep the heart soft enough for mercy. Hosea shows us that God's tears are not the end of the story. They are the beginning of the redemption story. In Jesus, that covenant takes flesh. Love takes flesh. Jesus becomes the faithful groom who redeems the wayward bride, and that's us. The one who says, "How can I give you up? I will love you freely with all my heart." And the cross, that's the auction block where redemption is won. And the resurrection, that's the wedding feast that continues on for all eternity. And we are invited always to that feast. And the good news, if we could get ourselves to see it and to believe it, is that God's tears are still falling. And they're falling for you and for us. Let it be so. Amen.